welcome everyone. My name is Janet. I'm working through the King James Bible and I'm in the book of Leviticus right now, working through chapters 5 to 7 today. We're going into the offerings with a bit more detail and we're getting the real regulations. So God is still talking to Moses at Mount Sinai and he is detailing all of this information over to Moses, who is then obviously going to convey this to the Israelites. So we will get started with chapter 5. And then the quick overview of chapter 5 is that when anyone sins with an oath or becomes unclean, now unclean means separated from God, basically. They've done something that is sinful, so they've separated themselves from God, which is what they class as unclean. It's not like they're dirty or something like that, it just means they are apart from God because they've sinned. So when anyone sins with an oath or becomes unclean, they should confess it and bring a sin offering. A guilt offering should be a ram. So we're going to get into the details of what this all entails. So, if you sin because you witness something sinful and do not speak up, then whoever does that are guilty. So if you witness something in your environment and you know it's sinful and you don't say anything, then you are then guilty. You have been had. Now, if they touch something unclean, that could be an animal or person. So if they touch somebody who's guilty of a sin, or if they touch an animal, and I had to do a bit of research into this because I was thinking, how on earth is an animal, what makes an animal unclean? And there's a list of animals that the Lord classes as clean, and others that are classed as unclean, those that are kind of like rodents that are scavengers, things like that. You know, like a crow would be seen as unclean, a dog actually, and cats are seen unclean by the Lord. So yeah, I was pretty surprised by all that. So if they touch an animal unknowingly, but they find out later on that they're aware, then they are guilty, and so they become unclean themselves. Also, if you're guilty, this is another way to become guilty. If you swear to somebody, like you're going to do something, you make a promise, and then you fail to do it, you're guilty. If you do it too late afterwards, you're guilty. So these are putting in the places when you're guilty. And once you're aware of that guilt, you have to come and confess to the Lord exactly what that guilt is. And then you have to bring your sin offering to the priest. So what you have to bring as a guilt offering is a female lamb or goat. That's what has to be offered. And you give it to the priest, and he goes through the ritual, which I mentioned yesterday. If you want to know all the details, the links are under this video as well for the chapters. He goes through the rituals, and then you're atoned, you're forgiven. Now, if you can't, say, afford a lamb, you would then bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons. That's what is accepted. One is for the sin offering and the other is for the burnt offering. So the priest again has to carry out the ritual for you to be atoned for the sin, and that is how you're forgiven there. So then if you can't afford to bring the birds even, the Lord has given you the third option, which is you can bring 1/10 of an ephah of flour, which is approximately 6 cups of flour, and they must not put any olive oil or any incense on them at all because they are a sin offering. So they bring that to the priest, and the priest will take them and they go through the ritual and atone for them. So remember, with a grain offering, the priest takes a portion of that, burns that portion, and then is able to keep the rest for themselves. So that's how the priests are kind of paid, that's their wage. Now the Lord also comes and says to Moses, when anyone is unfaithful by sinning unintentionally in regard to any of the Lord's holy things, they must bring a ram as penalty, without a blemish, and of proper value of silver according to the sanctuary shekel. So there's a specific amount there, and that will be classed as a guilt offering. Then they also have to make restitution, which is they have to make good for what they've failed to do and pay an additional penalty of 1/5 of its value and give it all to the priest. Then the priest has to do the usual ritual with the ram and atone for the person, and then they'll be forgiven. Any guilty wrongdoings by the Ten Commandments, they have to offer a ram without defect and of proper value. So that ends our chapter 5, covering all of that. So all of the guilt offerings is covered there, the sins and the guilt offerings. I hope that's clear, because it's so intertwined, it's just so detailed. And I'm not an expert, I'm just trying to make sense of the information I'm getting out of the Bible and a bit of research that I'm doing outside of that, just to bring it all together. So now we'll move on to chapter 6, and this covers basically anyone who cheats on a neighbour and how they have to make restitution, and that the fire must never go out when they're doing this ritual of the burnt offering. So the details on this are as follows. So the Lord again is constantly telling Moses all of this information. And he said, if someone lies, if they cheat, if they steal, if they swear falsely, etc., they must make good for whatever they have done. Then they have to add a fifth of the value to it and give to the owner on the day of the guilt offering. And the penalty, remember, is the ram, and they give that to the priest. No defects, keep saying this, no blemishes, nothing on it, and of proper value, so that proper sheckled value. And then the priest will do his thing and he'll be atoned and forgiven. So now we go into the regulations of the burnt offering. This is laid out. So the Lord says to Moses, give Aaron and his sons these regulations. The burnt offering is to remain on the altar hearth throughout the night until morning. So it has to stay on there throughout the night and right up until the morning. And the fire must be kept burning on the altar so that it's not allowed to go out. These priests are going to have to work pretty hard. They're going to have to keep making sure there's wood there, that it's constantly burning. So then, as the morning comes, they put their linen garments on and remove the ashes at the place and place them beside the altar. Once they've done that, they have to take off their linen clothes and just put on others, and then take the ashes outside of the camp to clean the ceremonial place. The fire has to be burning continuously, it must not go out. And every morning the priest has to add wood and arrange burnt offering on the fire and burn the fat of the fellowship offering on it. It must keep it burning constantly, it must never go out. So they've got a lot of work to do with these offerings when they are being burned, and the traditional way that it's got to be done. These are the regulations, they've got to follow them. So now we'll look at the regulations for the grain offerings. So the offering must be brought before the Lord at the altar, and they have to take a handful out for the burning of the memorial, remember, to God. So they take a handful out, and then Aaron and his sons shall eat the rest without yeast. No yeast, remember, in the sanctuary area. Eat it in the courtyard area. So they get to eat the non-yeast bread in the sanctuary court area. That will be carried on through the generations for Aaron and his descendant male sons. So they'll all get to eat these grain offerings, sort of the part that isn't burnt. And the Lord also says to Moses about the grain offering that it will also be used as part of the anointment as the priest, and it goes through a specific way that has to be done. You might want to read that yourself, but it's like a tenth of an ephah of flour, half on the morning, half in the evening. They have to prepare with oil on a griddle and then present into broken pieces. So that's part of the anointing period with this grain offering. So next we have the regulations for the sin offering. Now with the sin offering, the animal is to be slaughtered before the Lord in place of the burnt offering altar. It is to be the most holy, so it's turning it into holy. The priest who offers shall eat it, and in the sanctuary area courtyard. So there's a part of the fat that gets burnt, and then the rest is given to the priest. They eat. Whatever touches this flesh will become holy. Any blood splashes on a garment must be washed in the sanctuary area. The clay pot the meat is cooked in must be broken, So it's got to be broken, the clay pot. But it says if it's a bronze pot, then it has to be scoured and rinsed with water. So any of the male sons of the priests may eat this meat. Nobody else is allowed it. And they must not eat the blood. It all has to be burned, the blood. So they're allowed to eat the meat, but not the blood. And that concludes our chapter 6. Okay, we're now moving into our chapter 7, the final chapter today. You're doing really well if you're with me still. We're going through the guilt offering now. The animal must be slaughtered in the burnt offering area, and the blood must be splattered against the altar. And all the fat must be offered to the Lord. Now the priest can burn on the altar as food to the Lord. It is a guilt offering. Any male priest can eat in the sanctuary area only. So part of that can be given to the priest. Next we have the fellowship offer regulations. And these come in a couple of different forms. So we have the thankfulness offer. If it's a thankfulness offer, the person bringing the offer has to bring a thick and thin loaf without yeast, but also a thick loaf with yeast. And that is to be offered along with the animal of the sacrifice. So the priest will then do his thing, splash the blood on the altar, and then the meat will be obviously eaten with this bread, and that is the thanksgiving offer. And it must be eaten on the day, none left till morning, it says. Not allowed to eat any in the morning. So the other option is the free will offering, and that can be eaten on the day, but you can also leave it over till the next day, so you don't have to eat it on that day. Any meat, however, left over till the third day must be burned. So you can leave it a day or so, but on the third day, nope, it's got to be burned. It says if any meat is eaten on the third day, there are consequences. It says that whoever offered it will not be accepted, so it'll end up null and void if somebody eats that meat. And it will be reckoned with, it says, to their credit, for it's impure, and whoever ate it will become responsible. So there are repercussions if anything is done untoward with the free will offering. Now it says any meat in this sanctuary that touches anything holy, unclean, must not be eaten. So if anything touches something unclean, that it was holy, must not be eaten. It must be disregarded, and it must be burned. As for any other meat, anyone ceremonially clean can eat it, which is pretty much the priest. So anyone found eating the ceremonial meat other than the priest must be cut off from their family. So yes, anyone outside of the priests who are found eating this meat will be cut off from their family. That's what it says. So pretty severe consequences for those not abiding by these regulations. We finally move on to the priest's share, just to give the details of what this is. It says, anyone bringing a fellowship offering is to bring part as a sacrifice to the Lord. They must bring the fat together with the breast and wave before the Lord as a wave offering. Now the priest must burn the fat on the altar, but the breast belongs to Aaron and his sons, so he gets to keep that. And he said to give the right thigh to the priest as contribution, and Aaron shall have this as his share. So that's going to be his share perpetually from the Israelites. That's what they get, his sons and him as the priests. That's what they're given. That is kind of like their wage, and it's being clearly laid out by God here to Moses. So this is what God is doing. He's giving Moses all of this information at Mount Sinai, ready for the Israelites then, who will bring these offerings. So it's all carefully being laid out, and then the offerings can begin, because then everybody knows what's required, how it's got to be done. They'll then learn also what sins, and figure all of that out, and when a sin is done in whatever way, in different forms that it can come, they will be dealt with correctly by, it's just like a court really, isn't it? The tabernacle is like a court of law, and they're coming into that court yard with their guilt, their offering, and then the animal is going to then take all of that darkness on, really. It will be burnt in flames and released, and hopefully that Israelite that did the guilt will learn and not repeat again, because it's like the cycle can continue. So what have you learned from these 3 chapters? When you see all of these laws laid out, we need laws to keep us in place, right? Because otherwise we just run amok. Look at what the Israelites did when Moses was up Mount Sinai getting the 10 Commandments. He came down and they'd already gone off creating other things, and just, it's like we've lost an inner compass, an inner moral guide by us eating from that tree of knowledge. We've lost the way to live without sort of following this inner urge. And I feel it's like these urges that are the things that are pulling us in the wrong direction. It's like we have to be almost, it has to be painful, like these pretty severe offerings. It's not I can't see this as a nice way of dealing with anything. It's showing blood, and blood is representing that death, isn't it? The death of the sin. So yeah, these are pretty severe consequences. They're pretty clear rules that are laid out, so everything has to be governed by the priests. They have to make sure, and I mean, if they sin, they are accountable too, as we saw earlier in Leviticus 1-4. It was basically laid out there what the priests had to do. Anybody, nobody gets to escape these rules. They're all accountable. Everybody is accountable, and more severely for those who are supposedly holding the righteousness of the Lord. So there we have it, 3 chapters for you to take with you and do as you will. They're all here to teach us something, so what's it teaching you? That's for you to work out. Okay, thanks for being here, and I'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye.